Welcome back to Something You Can Do, a podcast for those hungry for action steps. I'm your host, KJ Kozak. Let's get into it. I'm really excited to be here today with my friend Skylar Allen, the founder of Skyhaven Healing. Sky and I know each other actually from a coaching credentialing course that we did through the Institute for Coaching Excellence. So, Sky, what is something you can do?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me, KJ. I'm super excited to be on this podcast with you. Something that you can do, something I'd like to talk about today is following your faith and essentially trusting your intuition and trusting your gut.
I love this. And I think that that really gets at the heart of you and all the work you do. So, why is following your faith and your intuition something that someone might want to do?
Well, speaking from my own personal experience in doing so, it's just opened up so many amazing pathways and doors for me to access like my dream life, so to speak. Like taking things from an intuitive thought or like a feeling that comes up randomly. And a lot of times we can get dismissive with those kinds of things, but I like to talk about what happens when you don't dismiss those gut feelings or those visions of what your dream life looks like and feels like, and what it's like to actually put that into practical life and take a dream into reality.
That's a beautiful thing and something I think that is very sorely needed right now. And
Mhm.
before I ask you more about the specifics of that and what that can look like, can you share a little bit more about your background and how all of your work as a coach and a healer lends itself to this conversation about following your faith?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So, I have a little bit of a zigzag background where I changed my mind a couple times, went forward, went backwards, went up, went down, and eventually ended up here. But I went to school for psychology, which I think was kind of the start of like the interest in humans and their healing process. It started with like essentially the mental healing or understanding people's brains and how we operate. So having a psychology background kind of opened the door for me being interested in working with people. I originally had an interest in doing therapy, and as I got closer to that field, realized I personally felt like it focused a little bit more on like negative things or like emotional, like not to say that that's not a space that people can overcome huge emotional things and be successful in so many ways, but that just wasn't for me. That's not the way that I wanted to work with people. So I took a little bit of a sidestep from working with people in like psychological or emotional healing type of way and went into body work, and I started working hands-on in like physical healing. I was assisted stretcher, which I know a lot of people are not going to know what the heck that is, and it might sound really weird, but in the non weirdest way, in the most professional way, I strapped people to a table and I stretched their bodies for them. So I know that sounds so strange, but it was really, really, really interesting for me to hands on work with bodies and understanding like your physical tension a lot of the times is related to emotionally stored things in your body like trauma or the way that we physically hold on to that. And again, with the psychology background of understanding like mentally how we store things, emotionally how we store things, and then to learn physically how that shows up in your body. Um, there's a really great book on that that I use a lot in school called The Body Keeps the Score, but we can talk about that later. But so in working in body work, I just became so intrigued with healing, like physically releasing things and in that emotionally releasing things. And I built up a clientele that was awesome. Like I loved working with people in that way. And a lot of the times you also acted as a form of a therapist because as you're physically releasing things, sometimes emotions come up, tears may fall sometimes. So it also got me really attuned to people's energy. Like as soon as they walked in the door, I could feel like, are we going to be quiet today? Are we excited about things? Are we in pain today? Like what's going on. So that opened the door for me to become interested in Reiki energy healing. And I actually got certified all the way through Reiki 3, Master Reiki Healer, through my friend Dr. Moon at Moon Holistics.
What a journey.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, a fun fact about me is I've never had any Reiki healing done, so we'll have to talk about that separately
Oh
because
yeah.
I've always been intrigued by it. Can you talk a little bit about like what that is and what it looks like for folks like
Oh
me who
yeah,
have
absolutely.
never experienced it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely one of those like woo-woo forms of healing. So I know it's not for everybody, or some people are skeptical. And even myself a couple years ago was skeptical. Like, okay, so you're not going to touch me, but you're going to heal my energy. Okay. So, and then I got to know it a little bit more. I went on my own spiritual journey and I was like, oh wait, there's actually something to this, especially if you're with a trusted person who's genuinely, treating it with the right intentions and tuned in. So Reiki is an ancient Japanese practice that revolves around essentially removing any energetic blockages throughout your chakra system is probably the most like direct, simple layman's terms that I could put it in. Um, which obviously, or maybe not obviously, maybe everybody might not be familiar with the chakra system, but essentially it works through your crown, your third eye, your throat chakra, your heart chakra, your solar plexus, your sacral, and your root chakra to alleviate any blockages in your sphere, I'd say. Maybe if sometimes that shows up, it shows up in different ways, especially kind of depending on like the healer themselves and how they attune to somebody. For me in particular, my hands typically go really cold or really hot, depending on hot spots that are going on in somebody. And as you're working through releasing that energy, you essentially just kind of hold the space around that chakra. And different healers will have their different flow. For me, it's a lot of like waving and moving and physically releasing and saying almost like intentional prayer around whatever's coming up for you. So let's say, for example, if you were laying down and we were doing Reiki, I might feel some blockages around your throat chakra or around your heart chakra. And I would just hold space and intention around pulling out whatever those doubts, those fears, those anxieties, those blockages are, and you'll just know when it shifts. Like it goes from either feeling really hot to feeling cool, or from feeling really cold to feeling more room temperature, or my body will get a physical sensation when it's time to move on, or your hands will naturally just kind of start to move. So think of it of like treating the healer as just a vessel to your spirit guides, to your energy fields, and you're just kind of attuning to a divine source of life force energy that is guiding you to where life force is being restricted in the other individual.
That's a really helpful grounding in this concept, and I think a really nice way to establish some of the ideas and perspectives and practices that you're bringing into today's topic and the thing that you can do. So, let's dig in a little bit more to following your faith. What does that mean
Yeah.
to you?
Mm, that's a good question. And honestly, KJ, that has changed over time. And I think that's an important concept to hold on to today is that that will change. It doesn't, there's not a magic elixir potion or like streamlined path to follow every single time. It shifts based off of your intuition. So following your faith in part is trusting yourself even when it pulls you in the wildest directions. hmm
Ooh.
hmm And following your faith at the root is staying true to yourself. And all of these things I know sound easier than they actually are done, but in the practical ways to hone in on that are listening to yourself and holding space for random thoughts that come up or emotions that come up or desires that you may have, like just paying attention to those things that come up and not being so quick to dismiss them. Like a quick example, which we can get into if we want to, but like the most recent example is going through this course that we went through. Like I went from when I was working in bodywork still, I'd moved into management, and the longer I was in management and upper management, I was like, ooh, I'm away from the core of what I love to do here. I don't really like being in corporate America. I don't really like managing all of these things or dealing with angry people like customers. I want to be the hands-on healer. Like I want to be working with people in a more directly meaningful way to my skill set. And so I just started thinking, oh, I don't really want to go back to like therapy stuff. I want to like kind of move forward with like Reiki. I want to move forward with being a healer. I want to move forward with like having these conversations with people, because that was the biggest thing that I learned from working on the table was I know how to talk to people. I know how to invite people to bring out what is really bothering them, and I know how to physically help them feel better and sometimes emotionally help them feel better. So I wanted to move forward in that kind of direction, which is what led me to thinking about life coaching. And when I made like had that thought, I researched it, I found the IFCE, and I had like an introductory call with Alexis, and the class was starting 2 days later. Like orientation was 2 days later. And so it like I had that thought, I researched it, I had the call, and then I was in orientation 2 days later, and then I started the class. And that might sound like divine timing, but the things behind it that make it like following your intuition is the things that I had to move things around in my life so quickly that were rooted in my life to make space for something that I felt called to do. And so that's where like the following your faith comes in of like, ooh, this class is how much? I'm gonna have to come up with that. How quickly? Ooh, how am I gonna do that? And oh man, I have a full-time job that I'm working 50 hours a week. How am I gonna make space for this class? Or how am I gonna like mentally turn off from talking to 50 people in an instant to switching gears so quickly. So that's the most recent example of what it's like to follow your intuition, because at now we just graduated this week. Congrats to us and the rest of our cohort. Um, but looking back, like, and and everybody got to witness all the things that came about in the last couple months. But that moment of intuition of, I think I want to work with people. I want to move forward in these ways. So it started with setting that intention of I want to move forward with working with people under these types of domains or structures or ideas. And I started looking into what might that look like, found the IFC, enrolled in it within the next couple days.
That's amazing, this sort of, and you mentioned divine timing too, which I know different people have different opinions about. And what I find so helpful about this discussion is the way that you weave together all of these different perspectives of like the more woo-woo side of divine timing and the spiritual alignment and feeling really comfortable in your intuition, but also this more um sort of uh the less spiritual side of, no, there's a thing that you wanted to do and you found a way to make it happen and you listened to your gut and you found ways to accommodate it. And I think that that's
Mm-hmm.
what's so lovely. And what I love about this podcast is it leaves space for like practical things like making scrambled eggs, but also like something you can do is follow your faith, listen to your gut, follow your intuition, and what does that actually look like in real life. So
Mm-hmm.
that example is really helpful. And I'll ask you more generally and from your perspective, both doing this in your own life and as a coach and energy healer, what are the
Mm-hmm.
steps involved in following your faith?
That's a great question, and I appreciate you asking that. I think, and again, like it is something that ebbs and flows and changes shape over time and in different situations throughout your life. But essentially, if I had to formulate it into what steps you take, is first getting in touch with your intuition, like getting in touch with your spiritual self. And if you're not a spiritual person, then it's just getting in touch with that like inner voice and your gut and those like visceral yes and no reactions, or those like just getting in touch really closely with yourself, your truest self, and how you actually feel about things, because that is what's going to help steer the ship. Like understanding when a guttural yes or a pull comes up in one direction or another, or when you're viscerally like, no thanks, that's not for me, I don't want to do that. So I would say that's the first step, is just like fine tuning that relationship with yourself so that
Mm-hmm.
you can really trust yourself to navigate and understand that when you follow that voice of yes, or when you avoid the things that make you feel like no, the way that that's going to directly impact the path that unfolds in front of you. Because ultimately that free will is there at the end of the day, and everything that comes about is based off of our own choices in one way or another. So for me, in my experience, walking the path of yeses And following that intuition has led me to a more positive experience more often than not. Not to say that life doesn't get hard and not to say that you don't get curveballs, even on the best path forward, because there's those life lessons and those like things that build character, as everybody loves to say. But um, when you're following that spirit and you trust yourself to know that, okay, I'm following myself because this feels good to me. But I also trust myself to know that even though I don't know what the path ahead looks like, I know that I'm going to handle it well. And if I need to readjust, I will. So it's developing that relationship with yourself and that mindset with yourself. And after you've kind of developed that relationship and you're walking on that path and you're finding a little bit more ease and a little bit more grace on how to move forward on developing a positive path for yourself, is trusting again your ability to make the right decision even when things get hard. And when I say that, I mean there may be times where you're tested to your faith is tested. Whether it be your faith in yourself, your faith in the world, your faith in your spirituality, your faith in all of it at once may be tested of like, man, I cannot see why the reason for this path. It's getting difficult. I still feel like I need to be moving this way, like I'm being pulled this way and I want to listen, but I don't I don't know. It's getting dark, it's getting stormy. I can't see the path ahead. How do I keep moving forward in this? And when you develop, this is where like the spirituality comes in of my human self, my emotions are depleted, my mental state is horrific, my physical body wants to shut down. I'm getting sick. Like all these things of my human self is not resilient in this moment, but my spirit is resilient. And that's going to carry me through when times get really tough. And when you're being tested in all those other ways, when you have that spirit to lean on, for me has been a literal lifesaver so many times. So that relationship is really important with your higher self, with God, with your angels, with the divine, with the cosmos, however you want to label it. That I call it that divine life source. That one thing that energetically we're all connected to. All forms of life are coming from someplace. At least that's my belief. When you're connected to that, it carries you through some dark times, man. And when I tell you that there was times, even recently, where I could not see through the forest, I could not see through the fog, but I just kept listening to that faith of it's going to be okay, just keep going. It was like 24 hours later sometimes. The next day I'm like, man, I could jump off the roof. And the next day I'm like, oh, I'm glad I didn't do that because look, here I am. It's totally fine.
1,000%. Like, and I think especially in the current climate where the world is just like on fire and it's really difficult
Mhm.
sometimes when things feel really activated. This makes me think a lot of things that we know from psychology and research into like meaning making, and that, I mean, to be really simplistic about it, we are happier and do better when we're able to make meaning and
Mhm.
find meaning in especially difficult experiences. So, before we continue down this path of like steps and what it looks like, what are some
Mhm.
practices or strategies that can help people through that groundedness of getting more in touch with their intuition, of being
Mhm.
able to listen to or connect with those more spiritual components?
Yes, absolutely. And those are so essential to have those tools in your tool belt and like what physical techniques can you have to do that? For me, like I'm a big journaler. I've been a journaler for probably close to 10 years, but specifically more so in my like adulthood of like 1920s, like going into your 20s, because those are such transitional times. Like I feel like every year you're a new person and you've done like 6 lives in the last year. So journaling for me has been really helpful. And I have a couple different ones because I'm a little OCD and I'm a little neurotic in the sense that like energetically I have a journal that's just about like positivity and dreaming and like doing the vision work, like a space that I'm allowed to have no logic and only dreams because I don't want to filter myself. I want to dream as big as possible without limiting myself. But I also don't let my negative thoughts go into that journal. So I have a separate one that's just for when like you want to tell the world F you and everything sucks and the world feels heavy and it's on fire. So I don't like that energy to be in the safe space. So I personally have a couple different ones depending on like where's my mindset and what do I want to release. Um, so journaling for me has been super important and helpful. It's especially if you're somebody who's like an overthinker or you're anxious or maybe feeling and struggling with big feelings and heavy feelings. It's such a good place to have an outlet because sometimes it's hard to talk about those things, or you just don't feel like there's going to be a setting or person that's going to get it the way that you're feeling it. So, treating your journal as a sacred space to experience yourself 100% authentically with no filter and no judgment is really,
Mhm.
I would highly recommend. Even though it can be a little bit difficult and disciplined to get into the habit of sitting down and writing, like people might not get into it. But when you start to look at it in a space of like, this is my me time where I don't have to filter myself and I just want to get it out, you'll eventually start to enjoy that time in that space. I also, something that has been really pivotal on my journey, my spiritual journey, has been angel numbers, which is a little bit more of a particular niche. I don't know if that's something that like generically everybody would be into, but essentially angel numbers are like numeric patterns that you just recognize. Like if you
Mhm.
notice like every single license plate it ends in 4 4, or you got a receipt and it was $7.77, or at the gas station it was 333, like those kinds of things where you get those type of numerical patterns. Sometimes it can come up and not necessarily sequential of the same number repeated, but like if you just keep seeing 247 everywhere, like that's just something, it's those patterns that come up. And when you look up, there's a site that I use called Joanne's Sacred Scribes, and I swear to you, every time that I've recognized a numerical pattern and I've looked it up, I've been like, dang, there's got to be something out there because this is addressing internal private thoughts that I've not journaled about, that I've not said out loud. And it really was like
Mhm.
that was a huge tool in developing faith and spirituality for me. So angel numbers and recognizing numerical patterns could be a good way just to connect with that like spiritual self, because again, to me it was like that was an inside thought. Joanne, how'd you know that? So um and tarot cards along that line too. Like those, I know that that's something that you and I have connected over, and that
Mhm.
is again a tool to reach your divine, your higher self, your angels, your spirit guides, whomstever you want to label it as. But that's a great tool to get clarity around any confusion or doubt or fear in your life and connect with your spiritual self and get to that point of like calm and ease and like tinglies in your spirit. So those are a couple methods that I would recommend from my own practice.
What I appreciate about those suggestions is that they are things that can be really accessible regardless of your like kind of cultural background or spiritual preferences, and that it's really about getting in tune with the universe around you and
Hmm.
the internal and external messages. I think that that's so helpful and important, especially in this day and age where a lot of people don't have that strong religious like underpinning, or they don't have
Hmm.
things connecting them to the spiritual world that they grew up with, or that they, or that, you know, letting go of some of those things. And I think it's so
Hmm.
important to be in tune with yourself and the resonance of the world around you, whatever that means.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right, and you're observing something that I've observed as well in terms of seems to be a lot of people that are walking away from how they grew up in terms of like their faith or their spirituality or their religious domains and structures, and saying like even in myself, I grew up in a very Catholic household and it got to a point where I was like, I don't think this God guy is actually the way that you're talking about this faithful practice. I don't think that he believes that. And then I was like, oh well, I'm just a bad Christian and I'm the
Yeah.
naughty one that doesn't believe in it or doesn't want to like follow this structure of practice. So I went from like Catholicism to atheism, which and I've had a lot of conversations with people who grew up Catholic or Christian in general and stepped away because at a certain point it didn't uphold how they actually felt and they felt guilty about things, or they just, or there's just a lot of people in the church who idealize the wrong things and then it turns people off of spirituality. But in that process of like, this doesn't work for me. If this isn't real, then nothing's real. And a lot of people go, I think, go
Mhm.
from that of like, oh, well, this set of beliefs I don't actually believe in, so nothing's real. And then they go from that like atheist mindset to more of an agnostic mindset, which is like, something's probably out there, but I don't have any idea what or how to follow it or how to connect with it. And if that's resonating with anybody listening and you're kind of in that agnostic phase of I think there's something, I just don't know what or how to find it or follow it or practice it or connect to it, That's honestly a great place to be because your spirit is open, and that is the only thing you need to find that connection and to find success in general. Like, if you're open, you will find your way. And for me, that's where the angel numbers came in of like, I don't want to talk to anybody about structured religion. I don't feel it. I'm not here for it. And I had a lot of thoughts about it, and feelings about it, but it was so beautiful to have something that made me feel like without any domain or structure or particular set of beliefs, I didn't have to have any of that. I could just show up and be like, I think there's something and this is resonating with me and I feel good when I'm connected to it. And it restored a sense of belief and faith in me that ultimately led to where I am today, which is very spiritual, but it doesn't belong to a specific religious domain. It's just kind of freelance spirituality.
1,000%. And I mean, it comes back to that idea of meaning making, right? Where like humans need on some level to have deeper understandings about the purpose of uh, things that happen, our
Mm-hmm.
existence, etc. Right? Like when big tragedies happen, we need to make sense of it and we assign purposes to it, or we struggle if we can't assign a purpose to why something bad
Mm-hmm.
happens. And I think that's part of why tarot is getting so popular, especially among middle class white women right now, is because middle class white women are like so lost and struggling
Mm-hmm.
to like, they like a lot of people are
Mm-hmm.
letting go of traditional religious practice, but then not having any sort of spiritual practices, especially in the United States when people get really disconnected, when white people get really disconnected
Mm-hmm.
from their like cultural ethnic background and are just looking for something to tell
Mm-hmm.
us what to listen to, what to look for, what to do. That's a big part of my own journey is figuring out from my own background and heritage, like what guides my life, because my own individual
Mm-hmm.
principles and morals and values only go so far for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I know what you mean. And I think that you've definitely brought up an interesting point of just like the way of the world right now. Like there's
Mm,
so many people who are walking away from it and are feeling, I'm assuming, like a little bit aimless or hopeless even. Like when you go through that like spiritual disconnect from how you grew up and what you were told to like, I don't feel like that's what am connected to, and then you step away. I mean, that right there in and of itself is listening to yourself and trusting your own intuition and following your own gut. And that like first step is so important, but there's a space after that first step where you're like, what the fuck? And you're like, what is what is happening here? Or how do I move forward in this? And so I think you're right. That space it exists and it is scary, but it's amazing that so many people are finding tools. And honestly, in the age of like instant everything, you can you don't have to sit in that lost space for so long. Like you can find yourself a
mhm.
community online. You can find an online community that creates in-person opportunities for you. Like so in one way, I feel like that's can be the power of the internet is it's instantaneously you can find things to connect to or tools that you can find or like order something online and it's there the next day that you feel like could be useful for you or just researching like I've never heard of Reiki before. Is that something that would be helpful for me in this time? Or I've never heard of a life coach before. Is that something that is better than therapy or different than therapy? How is it different than therapy? Or what is this tarot deck and how do I read them and what does this mean and all those kinds of things. So I love that people are going from, this doesn't feel right, I'm going to leave it, but also what's next? Let me look into it. Oh, this feels cool. And when you have a world of people who are shifting their consciousness to be more open and less structured by specific religious domains and structures and belief systems, I think that's ultimately how the world becomes a better place because people are becoming more true to themselves and what they believe and who they are and how they practice their beliefs. True. Like it doesn't have to be because there's such a divide, and I know we've seen it in this country of, oh, you don't look like this, talk like this, believe in this, then I don't like you and you're the enemy. And so the less
Mhm.
tools of division that we have, and the more open we can be about respecting different forms of practice under the same general concept, I think tensions get better and relationships get better.
1,000%. And bringing this back to this thing you can do of following your faith, we've talked a little bit about like how to start to cultivate that and get into your intuition. Um, let's talk a little bit more about like that action part, taking the
Hmm.
plunge, figuring out what to do.
Hmm.
What are some of the steps or what does it look like when you start to get into that part of this?
That's a fabulous question. I know that myself is going to be an interesting uh, perspective to hear because it's not traditional in any sense of the way. But I guess that's why we're talking about it, right? Like, how do you get creative and how do you do that? So, I would say the best example I could give of taking an idea and bringing it into reality is when I first moved to Colorado. I'm originally from Northern Virginia, outside of DC, which I had just got to a point where I was like, this is not for me. Like, I feel like my soul is being drained. I don't like the energy here. It's too hustle and bustly. People are kind of rude. Everybody's on their own timeline. Like, it was not an atmosphere that I felt like I could thrive in. And I started having, like, I'm big on vision boards and journaling and, like, excuse me, the concept of I just want to dream big and without filter. So at the time, this was 2021, 2020, 2021, like still kind of weird COVID times. So it was easier to dream because we were locked in. But we, I was thinking about,
All we did
okay,
was
well,
dream.
all we did was dream, man. But it got me here. So this is the story of how you dream and bring it into real life. So I was just in a state of like, okay, well, with no filter and no limitation, what does like my perfect life look like right now? And it wasn't like too far off into the future. It was like if I could just snap my fingers right now, what would be the kind of life that I would be want to living like perfectly to a T. And so for some reason, had felt such a pull to Colorado. And I had never been to Colorado. I didn't know anybody from Colorado. At that point, my travels were fairly limited. At this point, they're not, but at that point, they were. And so it made no sense, but I felt it. So logic was not in the room. It was just dreaming. We were like, okay, Colorado, cool. That's 2,000 miles away from where you currently live. Let's do it. So I printed out some pictures of this mountain range and posted it on my vision board. And I had written a letter to my future self from my current self, like thanking me for getting there and doing that and getting me out of it. So I was already projecting into like, you can do this. Like I was trusting in my future self to take care of things somehow. So that was helpful, just like part of that manifestation piece. So I had pictures on the wall of Colorado. I had written a letter to my future self thanking me for like making my dreams come true. And I had started like looking for things and jobs and places in Colorado, like going through the logical steps of like, oh, here's this idea. I'm gonna get there in the next like 6 months. And then following a couple weeks from envisioning like my life next year, something just clicked in me and I was like, wait a minute. I don't need permission to from anybody before I make this happen. I'm an adult. I have a car that's paid off. I have savings in my savings. Actually, at that point, that wasn't very true because I had to repair my car. But anyway, I had a dream that I was holding on to, and I felt rich because of it. I was like, I'm working towards something. So, and there was some stress in my life at the time that was really detrimental to me and unhealthy relationships and I had gotten into some fights with my family just like things it was obvious that the environment I was in was not meant for any more time in my life. I was like, okay,
Mhm.
gots to go. I gotta spread my wings and fly was where I was at. So luckily at the time I have an older sister who's freaking awesome and has created so many opportunities for me that I otherwise life would have just been so much harder and I would have had to figure out stuff excessively more on my own. So I essentially made this decision on a Sunday that like I'm done with it here. I cannot with these people, with this place. I'm out. So I packed everything up in my little CRV at the time and made this decision on a Sunday, hit the road on Monday, and called my sister from the road and was like, "Hey, can I stay with you?" She was living in Arizona. And can I stay with you? Because I'm on my way. And she was, without even missing a beat, she was like, "Oh my gosh, your room is ready. Can't wait to have you here. I'm so excited for you." And she was like, "By the way, what are you doing?" And I was like, "I don't know yet, but we'll talk about it when I get there." So it took me a little while to get there, turn it into a little road trip. And I stayed there for a couple months just to kind of save some money and figure out what I was actually doing because it was just that moment of I want to be in Colorado. I'm sick of it here. I'm going. And that moment changed my life for the best because I decided to trust myself that I have no vision. I've never been there. I don't have a job lined up yet. I don't have a place yet. I don't know. What if my sister doesn't let me stay with her? Like I was in the car going. Like I had already crossed the state lines. So
Mhm.
it was that idea of I have such a pull. I trust myself to make it work. I know that I'm no stranger to working hard. I'll work 3 jobs if I have to. I'll sleep in my car if I have to, but I'm going. And so it was that determination. And
Mhm.
luckily my sister made it easier on me and I didn't have to like go like be homeless. But when I got there, I that's when I started thinking about, okay, well, first of all, I was applying to any job anywhere, but I ran into a struggle of okay, well, no job wants to hire me because I don't actually live here yet, and no apartment place or anybody wants to rent to me yet because I don't have proof of income there yet. So I hit this wall of like, all right, well, how am I supposed to get here if nobody's taking a leap of faith? So I applied to this place called Stretch Zone, where I became the stretch practitioner, and I went on a series of interviews, and they were like, "We really like you, and the job's yours if you want it. You just have to get here. Our training is Monday, May 22nd, 2022." And I was like, "Okay." So they gave me like a couple weeks, and I was like, "Can you write me a official offer letter so that I can have proof of income for these places?" So it came down to Monday, May 22nd was the training. By Friday, the like 20th or 19th or something, or Thursday, I did not have a place to live. I did not have it together. Friday, by the grace of God or whomsoever, I found this lady on a website called roomies.com. And if that's not the sketchiest thing you've ever heard in your life, I would not recommend going this route, but it is what happened to me. Roomies.com was full of like older bachelors who needed just a random roommate, and I was like, ew. Or college kids that needed their 10th roommate, and I was like, ew. And then I found this sweet lady who was like recently divorced and had an extra room and she had a son and she was into like herbalism and like had a garden. I was like, "Oh my God, I this is the only option
That's
for me
amazing.
on this sketchy ass website." So I sent her an email and was like politely, professionally begging her to let me like I was telling her about my journey and that I had this job offer and I just need to get there. And luckily she let me in. So I got there Sunday night and training was Monday morning. So it came down to the weekend. And the whole time my family was like, because I'd been in Arizona for a couple months, and they were like, "What are you actually doing? Like, you're moving on Monday for this job. You don't have a place to live. What are you doing?" And I was like, "I don't know. It's going to work out. It'll be fine. Watch me." So I held strong to that faith the whole time. I knew it was going to work out because I knew I was supposed to be there. So I started training on Monday in studio, and I knew by lunchtime, the first day of training, that like this was my place, these were my people, I was gonna love this, and I was gonna be good at it. So it was a week long intensive training of hands on learning how to do all the things because you have to be certified and know what you're doing, just like physically hands on work with people. And I remember by the end of that training week, you have like a test out. It's like a pass fail. Like you either can do this safely and you're approved by our trainers to do this, or you're not, and we're not going to let you stretch people because you don't know what you're doing. And when it came time to test out, I freaked out. It was like my whole move, my whole life hit me all at once of like, oh my God, if I actually don't pass this, like, what am I going to do? I'm not going to have a job. I'm not going to have money. I don't have time to waste. So I remember laying on the, like, I switched with my partner, and as soon as I was doing it, everything left my brain. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna botch this. And so we switched, and I'm laying on the table, and tears just start like uncontrollably streaming. And she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "You're doing amazing. Just keep going. You're gonna crush it." And I remember my trainer rolled up, like I have my eyes covered. I'm trying not to let everybody in the room know that I'm crying. And I hear these little wheels come up. And my trainer is like, "You're doing all right, bud?" And I was like, trying to keep it together. And I was like, I'm just really nervous. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And he was so
Oh.
sweet, and he encouraged me, and just was like, you know what you're doing. Just don't think about it being a test. Think about it being like a purpose. I don't think he said it just quite that, but that was the vibe that like I got from him. And
Hmm.
I just did it. I passed. Obviously, everything was fine, and I started my journey. And I remember the first couple weeks of being in that space, I was not sure of myself. Like I was building the physical strength to be able to work with bodies, all different types of bodies. And I like my first stretch ever was somebody who was like 300 pounds and 6'5", and I was
Oh my
literally
gosh.
dripping sweat. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. So the first couple weeks, I was super unsure of myself. I was like, oh, I was showing up anxious every day. I wasn't sure of myself. I was having a hard time remembering things properly, and then it just kind of fell into place. Like I was like, okay, this is something that's just gonna take practice. Eventually, you get the hang of it. And what I think the important thing, I know I'm rambling here, but the important thing to hold on to is I showed up anxious anyway. Like I still did it. I still went and showed up every day. And I found reasons bigger than myself to show up. Meaning like I have people on my schedule who are paying to be here, who took the time out of their day to be here, and they're relying on me to help them feel better. And that was motivating me so much is that this is bigger than me. I was brought here for some reason. I'm supposed to help people feel better. Let me just buckle down and focus. So there was a period of working through the change, the scariness of that, the anxiety of that, not being sure of myself, but I still showed up anyway because I just moved my whole self across the country to do this, and I wasn't going to give up on it. And so fast forward, I was at that job for 3 years and had three promotions in 3 years. I got to the tippy top that I possibly could be in management. And I had made the best friends I've ever had in my life at this job, who are still in my life and still, like, none of us work there anymore. But we all, luckily, like, I was brought into a space where I got to meet these people and we became best friends and lifelong friends. And I met my now fiance there. And have met, some of the clientele. When I moved into my first apartment, after there was a little bit of a hopscotch journey, but when I moved into my first apartment, the whole thing was furnished by people who were my clients because they just
Hmm.
wanted to help. So, in moving into my first apartment, I had like dishes, glasses, furniture, lighting, everything that you could possibly need was just gifted to me. So, those are the types of things that remind me that you're on the right path and you've met the right people because things eventually just start to fall into place effortlessly. Even though you're scared or you might not see through the forest, like your things will align for you when they're meant to be there. So, and now like I think about 3 years later when I first moved out here from I've never been to Colorado. I got nothing but $5 in a dream in my pocket. I'm going anyway. It worked out. 3 years went by and I climbed to the tippy top of that ladder. I got the courage to start my own practice. I met the love of my life. I made the best friends I could have ever. And if I didn't follow that initial feeling of Colorado sounds cool, none of that would have happened and my life would be so different. And I wouldn't say for the better.
And it also sounds like a big part of that was making a lot of space to figure out what it was that you wanted. Like that dreaming and visioning, and there's something about Colorado that really feels right, and like letting yourself trust that vision. Sounds like it was also a
Mm-hmm.
really big part of this journey. And I really appreciate your sharing all of this um with me, with the
Mm-hmm.
podcast listeners, all 12 of them or whatever. But it's our audience is growing. But
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think that it's just such a powerful story about following your faith, but also, like, again, what that means in real life is it means knowing when you're unhappy. It means knowing when something needs to be different. It means listening to yourself when things don't feel quite right. It means
Mm-hmm.
letting yourself dream and want something bigger. And something that really stood out to me as you're sharing your story was that this wasn't a foolish, like, oh, I'm just going to go and things are going to work out. Like, you knew yourself. You knew what you were
Mm-hmm.
capable of. You knew what safety nets you had. You knew,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't just like go out. You knew that you had a trusted older sister that would probably let you crash.
Yeah. Yeah.
on her
Thank
couch.
God for Sarah.
You know, you knew that you had the work ethic and the physical ability to just hustle and grind and work and make it work.
Hmm.
And you trust yourself when that isn't working anymore, when there is something else you need. And it's so
Hmm.
powerful the way that you connect these physical manifestations of the relationships and faith, that and this is something that's really important to me. When you were talking about like you're in your first apartment, how all of the furnishings and the dishes and things were
Hmm.
from people that you worked with. That reminds
Hmm.
me very much of something. I feel like a lot of the things that I do are a manifestation of all of the people that have come before me. Like I'm not
Hmm.
the most woo-woo person. I'm not a very woo-woo person actually. In the grand scheme of things, more than the average bear maybe. But like for me, for example, cooking is a time where it's like when I'm cooking something, it is possible because of all of the other people in my life that taught me how to cook. Like
Hmm.
when I'm making meatballs,
Hmm.
that's my dad and my grandma and all of these other people that like are in this one thing. And I'm hearing that so much in
Hmm.
your journey too.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say one of the things that I'm the most passionate about is community. And you cannot
Hmm.
do anything completely alone. Like, even though I would say a large part of this journey was trusting myself and I was walking the walk, I had so much support from family, from friends, from clientele who some of those people are not in my life at all anymore, but they at the time took the time and out of the kindness of their heart of wanting to support me and knowing my journey were like, oh, well, we have this extra dish set, or oh, we have a couch that we're getting rid of. It's, in good shape, or those kinds of things where community just comes together and it's so easy. And I'm also remembering that a huge part of the story that I left out was I mentioned the mountain range that I had put on my vision board.
Hmm.
I ended up investing in some land in Colorado before I'd ever gotten here, sight unseen. It just felt right. And
Hmm.
the mountain range that I had printed out before I invested in this land is the view from my plot of land. And
Oh.
that was such a huge confirmation of like, at the time that I was envisioning things that to me, like behind the scenes, there are things that are already orchestrating in your favor from divinity and from a higher place of purpose in your path. And, you know, that I've been down there a couple times. I ended up moving a couple hours away from where that plot of land is, but it's something that my friends and I go to for camping, and people know, like, other people can go and camp there. Like, it's I by no means feel like people can own land. That's not like a personal
Yeah.
belief that I have, but to invest in it in a way that gives you a safe space to go to, knowing that you can always go there, is beautiful. And I remember seeing it for the first time, and I couldn't even put into words how incredible that feeling was. It was like being in touch with true freedom. And that confirmation spiritually of you've done the right thing and you're in the right place. And it's those things to look out for too, those little confirmations, because I have been a person where I can just kind of focus on the next goal and just like do the vision and then do the work and then do the vision and then do the work. And I've had to put into practice slowing down and taking the moments to, recognize your accomplishments and enjoy them. And, you know, that's so important in trusting yourself, is to bask in the accomplishments because you actually did it. You set out to do what you meant to do. Whether it could be however big, however small, it doesn't matter. Accomplishment is an accomplishment and you did that. And that is such an important piece to hold on to in the process of following your faith, is to know you're never alone. And even when it feels like it, or if it doesn't feel like it, at the end of the day, you're still showing up for yourself, by yourself, with yourself. And your spirituality, your angels, your team, your spirit guides, your higher self, God, whomsoever, is always around and accessible for you to support you when you need it. But it is coming from you. And it's just important to recognize that you're capable and you got this. And wherever your soul is guiding you, follow.
It's a powerful message. And
Hmm.
I think this has been such a fruitful conversation that helps bring some grounding to something that tends to not be very grounded or action oriented.
Hmm.
Do you have any last thoughts or little nuggets of wisdom for folks that might be exploring following their faith?
Well, I mean, it is an individual's journey, and the last piece of advice I would have is just to follow that journey. Like don't cop yourself out of it, don't think yourself out of it, don't feel yourself out of it. Just trust yourself to follow it. Follow your path. And to plug myself here, I happen to specialize. I just started this business. Sky Haven Healing is built around Reiki energy healing, spirituality coaching, and life coaching in terms of personal empowerment and like life transition. So if there's anybody who just needs some support along the way or has questions or is interested in inviting me into that space to help them, I am happy to show up. You can find me online at skyheavenhealing.com. You can find me on TikTok at Skyhaven Healing LLC, or you can find me on Instagram at Skyhaven Healing. And DMs are always open. Website is I'm constantly checking for people, so I'm accessible if you need a hand, and if you don't need a hand, I'm wishing you luck on your journey.
I love it. What a beautiful message. Sky, thank you so much for joining and sharing your talent and your story, and uh, looking forward to hearing how other people are able to follow their faith.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, KJ. This was so fun. So fun.
I'm so glad that you made it to the end of this episode, because it means that you got all those juicy nuggets from such a wonderful conversation. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, subscribe, leave a 5-star review, all the things you do for your favorite podcasts on your favorite podcast platforms. If you didn't like it, you can keep that to yourself. Find us on Instagram at somethingyoukandopod, or email us sycdpodcast@gmail.com. Remember that this is something you can do, not things you have to do or should do. The topic might not apply to you for whatever reason, and that's okay. Tune in again next time for Something You Can Do. Hope that you have a great day.